Surf's Up. In the third episode of the Mauisnake show, I'm joined by Krimbo, who recounts his rookie year with Big, upbringing under the tutelage of Gabi, Tabson, and kRYSTAL, and he looks towards 2023. But first, Thorin and I break down our picks in the HLTV award categories that were just released. I was on the panel for this, and you'll hear my entire ballot and my reasonings, and you'll get Thorin's takes too. I also bring in some choice quotes from Frank Herbert's Dune. This podcast is brought to you by my Patreon, which is transitioning from the It's Server Time Patreon. If you are already subscribed to that, I thank you, and I will be adding ways to shift the rewards and benefits from that to future endeavors. All right, we're recording this on the 15th of January. It's in the evening in Europe. It is actually bright and early for me in Hawaii. I'm here with Thorin on the Mauisnake show, and we're going to talk about the HLTV awards. So, Thorin, do you get to watch any of the awards?
I could have, but I didn't, just because, I mean, I'll be real, it's very petty, and I just don't like HLTV at all. No, the real reason why I didn't watch that show was because, one, I actually do think shows like that, like, they only really work if you're one of the people who's nominated for the awards. Because, like, why would I sit around for all those hours and hours just to find out that, like, what I said on By the Numbers is right, and Axile is number 4 because he's not an ARPA, and then Shiro's number 3, and then Zemo's number 2 because he has all the stats, and then Sable's number, like, you know what I mean? I can't give you 3 hours to find that out. Like, I already knew that, spoiler. And also, I'll just make the old joke again, won't I? Whereas everyone else's Ultimate Horror Movie is a Serbian film, in esports, contextually, my Ultimate Horror Movie is a Serbian list. See what I did there? Yes. Not bad.
Yeah, that is what it is for those. I guess
did actually look, I will say, from the glance I didn't see, it did look quite good, actually. They looked like they did a pretty good job with it. By the way, one thing I'll say they did nail already is, like, I can laugh all I like about HLTV over the years and how whack they've been and stuff. Tell you what, though, mate, they actually did nail it in the sense that they got all the social proof. Do you see how many legendary players went?
Yes.
Like, the audience was just, like, goated players. Like, yeah, but all I'll say is this. It doesn't matter what I think at that point in time. They nailed it. Like, you just killed it. The actual, when they glanced to the like, half an hour or so, when they put it on the crowd, that looked fucking mega. Because you just saw, like, wait a minute, that's Olaf Meister and, like, Forrest there. Like, that looked sick, I will say that. That looked very good.
Yeah, I got invited for this, and I didn't think I was going to experience any FOMO at all. But after I saw all the players that they got and all the talent that went there, I was like, okay, this would have been a fun time. I'm sure everybody had a great time after the show, too. So, yeah, and I also
think an industry moment, it looked cool, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I don't think... The main thing about the show and watching it from not being there is just that I think we kind of just knew what almost every award was going to be anyways, and if there were any suspense at all, like you said, if we didn't know who the top 4 players were in probably the order, because you said it on By the Numbers, I had the exact same thing when I made my, like, fantasy prediction list on their website. I kind of felt like it was very obvious who the... I think, like, even Niko 5, Axile 4, like, all of that was...
Yes, exactly.
It just felt like it was just destined to be. But we're going to get into the part of the award show where it was the panel, or like the talent. They were voting for this. I voted on this. I can give my whole spiel for why I voted for this, but I want to hear Thorin's also. So what we're going to start with is the op of the year. This award was won by Simple. But Thorin, is there any debate in this one? Is this the most clear-cut one?
By the way, one, I will say I was not asked to vote on this, but there's not really no change in the habit of a lifetime there from HLTV. What I will say is this is the one where I actually think it's either a slam dunk or a really interesting convo, because people will know ever since 2018, I've always brought this up. Technically, Simple is an AWP in the sense that the AWP's the weapon he uses the most. He's clearly the best at getting the kills with the AWP. But actually, when we say AWP, and especially when you do a category like this, like, it's essentially a role they're dividing it by. I think to this day, Simple isn't really the AWP. It's why actually, by the way, Maui, as an aside, I have always thought, I actually think Na'Vi actually might be a little bit too cynical when they let all these AWPers go, like Monacy and Headtrick and stuff. Like, the joke is, if I had known what Monacy would actually become, I would have just tried to make it work, because the joke is, like, Simple could definitely play a non-AWP spot and still kill everyone with the AWP. So the problem I have essentially is, the short version is, yes, it's Simple, isn't it? Because he's the best player, he uses the AWP the most, he gets the most kills with it. But it's essentially to me, it just comes down to how strictly are we categorizing, like, what we mean by an AWP. If we just mean get some most kills with the AWP, it's definitely Simple. If you want, like, a classical style AWP, I would probably say Shiro should win it by that sense. To me, he's more the traditional spots, the way you use the weapon. He's definitely not doing the Simple style. So I think that's just more maybe a category discussion.
Yeah, there was also, like, a discussion here between the difficulty between 2 and 3. I know a few people, like Maniac tweeted out, for example, that he would have not been surprised if Shiro came in second place. I think he was talking about the HLTV list, not this award in general. But I think that, like, there was some debate, and I think that I'm glad the direction that HLTV is moving in is what I'm going to say. Because if they just went by rating alone, I looked at the HLTV 2022 LAN ratings. Shiro actually had the highest rating overall. I think Zaiwu actually was second, and then Simple was third. And so I'm glad that they gave it to Simple, because it shows that they're actually exercising some judgment here, as opposed to just letting the number do all the talking. Because the only reason that Shiro, to me, is getting the highest rating is because he's getting the rating for all the reasons that rating is bad, which is that he's saving a lot, that he's getting kills in the exits. And when you look at ADR, KPR...
Also didn't go that far in majors and stuff, doesn't have to play the harder matches.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly important when selecting someone for who is the X of the year. It needs to be like, did they do it in the biggest moments consistently, or did they even get far enough to even prove themselves in those moments? But ADR, KPR, the stats that I think... I care about ADR a lot. I care about kills per round a lot. I don't care... Like, rating to me, because I didn't come up with an advanced stat, I don't necessarily always care about like that. I think like the worst, for example, we'll get to opener of the year after.
But this way, as a quick aside, this is something I've been trying to unpack a lot the last year, which is what I always tell people is, I like a lot of the other stats as like, usually like them relative to like a trend, like what are the other people's stat there? So I make it abstract, but I have to say, I've said this in the past, to me, the king stat is just kills per round.
Yeah.
And the reason why is obvious, because kills are the most impactful thing in Counter-Strike. And I've just looked over it over the years, Maui. It's why I know, for example, people do actually slightly underrate Blame F, in my opinion. Because when they go, like, it's just bait, and it's like, no, other players wouldn't get those kills, mate. They can bait all day long. Like, if you get a really high KPR, unless you are, like, the most absurdly selfish player ever, you just have to be doing something really well. Like, I don't think it can be faked, sort of that stat,
Yeah, I think so too. But I also give this to Simple. The way I voted on my ballot was 1 Simple, 2 Zaiwu, 3 Shiro. I think this was a very obvious in terms of ordering. I think that this, I don't think there's much more to unpack here unless you have anything to say, or do you want to move? You ready to move on to opener?
That's all good. I think AWP was the easiest one.
Yeah, okay. So let's get into opener here. For my votes, I put 1 Niko, 2 YEKINDAR, and 3 I put Rain. How would yours look?
The problem with this one is this is actually one, I think, where it's more about like the eye test of how we think these people play in their teams. So I actually agree with you. If I go through all the possible criteria, at the end, my conclusion is, since this is the category I'm putting Niko in, like, I know we can get into a whole thing later where they have Axel, a different one. I would have had him in this one as well. But I'm putting Niko in this category entry. And so of the entries, I actually do think in his team, he simultaneously does do a lot and also seems to take a lot of initiative in this exact regard as well. So I have to say, I do think he wins in that regard. He does seem like, of all the players who play this category, however we're defining this type of rifler, he does the best mixture of like really good raw entries with someone else, and then also helping use utility with the other person with the entry. So I actually just give him it in that sense. Like, I think this is essentially an area in his game where Niko's like mastered the game, which, by the way, is another area which, this is why when you're too reductive with terminology, actually can be the enemy. This is what we don't even give him credit for. Dude, this guy used to be like one of the god lurkers. Yeah. Like, he was playing a very different style once upon a time. Like, I actually think mad props now he's reinvented himself in G2 with all the problems they've had. Like, it seems to me like he's changed his style in direct response to what they needed in the team.
Niko is...
So I give Niko number 1.
Yeah, Niko's proved himself to be the most comprehensive rifler in the game, period. I think he's been that for the last few years also. And I think this category was, when you looked at the points, like the way that the panel voted, I think YEKINDAR was just a few points off from Niko. Like, if one person decided to put YEKINDAR number 1 and leave Niko off of their ballot, nobody should do this, obviously.
That doesn't surprise me, though. That's why I said, though, dude, it's more about like how we define it. Because to me, the thing with YEKINDAR is this whole brand is I am the entry guy.
Yes.
And he comes from the team where Jame and everyone baits. So, like, that was like the joke is, that was like it was almost like that was like wrestling. They were just putting him over as an entry. They were like, look, we literally make this guy run in on his own and try and kill 2 people. Like, the problem is, so in Team Liquid, when people look at that team, the joke is like he only ever gets praised for his entries. So I think in that sense, people just don't notice like some of the other areas his game aren't as good, It's not a shame to be second to Niko, mate. It's pretty fucking amazing. We all pretty much acknowledge Niko's the god rifler,
Yeah, I think what YEKINDAR's done so well, though, is that he's made what I think some people thought was sort of a shallow style, where it's like all he can do is this, and he's defined himself by that, and he's actually been an asset to Liquid. They made a couple grand finals. Like, there's nothing that you can take away from him, even though in terms of, like, where this award was actually kind of easy for me to pick Niko over YEKINDAR, is that, simply speaking, like, YEKINDAR was under 50% on opening kills in a lot of respects. And whereas Niko was, Niko's success rate for how often he's doing it is unbelievable. And
It's ridiculous.
I pulled up one stat that was like so interesting to me that
Well, I don't think people know, dude, is the last 2 years, the one you're on about is the one to look at. It's entry attempts. Go look for that at Niko, and you guys are going to be shocked when you know. Because when you see his numbers, you're going to think he must be bait, and you must think he's a lurker. He's not in any way, mate. It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, because on T side, he has, for 2022, he had above a 20% attempt rate. And for people that maybe aren't too familiar with the stat, I always say 20% is kind of like, if you're even going to be considered an entry at all, it needs to be above 20% because it means over 1 out of 5 rounds, you're the one that's actually doing something for your team. Niko had over 25% attempt rate. So and like he had a higher success rate on T side than RobbaN. And RobbaN was like, just, you know, if a duel's coming to RobbaN, it's because he's just passively waiting for it. He's just letting them come to him. And yet Niko is looking for duels and he's succeeding more often than RobbaN was. Like, this was a no-brainer. Yes. YEKINDAR was under 50% for that. And I think that what you were saying about the way Niko's doing it within the pack, like on his own, like he's finding openings in so many different ways. That's so impressive to me, as opposed to like YEKINDAR's such a one-note entry in that regard. Whereas Niko, he has like so many tricks in his bag.
To me, the way I categorise the two is YEKINDAR is going to just do that approach. Look, he has loads of sort of openings to how to get into the entry, but even so, that's all he's going to do. So if he loses, he's just going to try 20 times and die. Niko has more to his game, though. Like, that's the thing. It's also, let's be real, it's like the simple Zero thing. Zero's so young in his career, mate. He's got so many more years to level up in this regard. Because I also do think as well, by the way, like when it comes to this particular category as well, I think people also mega underrate the fact that, like, I think what made Niko actually get wrecked a little bit, dude, on those end-of-year rankings where he is number 5 and most people have him number 5 and no one really has him in the conversation this year to be number 2 and number 3. Like, everyone just thinks he's essentially 5 or 4. I actually think what wrecked Niko this year is just how, like, it's not recency bias, but it's a bit like that, which is a lot of Niko's worst games would just be like, it's a bit like Axel, that it would just be the last game that they got eliminated from. And so, because that's in your memory at the end, you go, like, I kept thinking to myself, like, Niko's had a pretty bad year. And then I'd go back, like, what are you on about? He dominates, like, every group stage. Like, basically, the joke is, it's just unfortunately like the big quarter of the semi-final where you would often have like an odd map where he went off, and that just makes you think, he's not doing that well. But then you look at the rest of his numbers, he's dominated the game. Like, when you consider how messed up his team, he's actually had a very good year.
Yeah, and vividly from memory, some of the ways that G2 would lose in the last games is sometimes, I mean, it was the calling, it was like the team choking as a whole. Like, it wasn't even just him, and sometimes you can only do so much, you can only rise above so much your teammates when you have like 4 gun rounds and a half because you're just getting completely demolished. So let's go to closer of the year. All right, so for this one, I'll start with you. Who was your closer of the year? And again, this term is a little bit odd they use this, even though I think both of us thought Axile, he's in the pack a lot, he's fighting with the group a lot early in rounds, but they put him in this category. So does he make your closer?
Here's what's weird about this one is if you actually look at the 3 roles that they've made for their rifles. So obviously AWP and IGL are self-explanatory, but then they've made these 3 other roles. There's entry. Okay, we sort of get that one. I think most people have got that one fairly down, except have they? Because as I just mentioned earlier, Axile's in the closer one somehow. To me, I mean, I'm going to guess Axile done what, like 22% opening entries. Like, to me, he's an entry player. So I find that one weird. It almost does look like they've tried to make an extra category to give Axile and Niko the award. Like, it does just look like that. But to me, the problem I have with this one is, if they're going to say closer like that, I actually take, if they go an entry and closer, to me, closer should logically be the lurker rifler, right? But then they put Perfecto there, whereas to me, they've done anchor, which to me is support player. And to me, Perfecto's the support. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. That's why, to me, unfortunately, that's why when you're trying to drill down these categories, sometimes you get further away from the point. So all I'll say is, if we're going to these sorts of riflers that I look at, they've got in the mix there, they had Perfecto in their mix, right? If he's in the mix, if that's part of the category, this is the problem with the anchor one. Then in theory, I probably would still pick Perfecto. Like, I actually do think, look, he definitely did have some tournaments where he wasn't as good on his game towards the end of the year and didn't win the clutches. But I think if you go through the year, bearing in mind Na'Vi for this year in totality, if you remove 2021, actually was always up and down if you look at the whole year. Even when it was basically, because the drama started in the first event of the year, Katowice, they were always up and down individually. I actually think Perfecto generally still had a very good year. Loads of times I still saw him win some good clutches. Not as many, but then again, I'll also throw this in there, right? When do you think it's logical that you would win less clutches on a year where Bit doesn't frag a load of people and damage a load of people? Electronic doesn't damage it. The point is, those people fragging better makes Perfecto's job easier.
Yeah.
Now he's killing 2 people that have 20 health instead of 85, you know. So logically, he should have an actual downturn no matter how he plays. He's just playing a harder version of the game, basically. So if we're going to put Perfecto in that category, I would pick Perfecto like they did. The problem I have is, Maui, essentially, if we're going on this logic, I don't think if they're saying closer, are they really meaning clutch play? Because this is where I'm so confused by their categories, mate. Because if this is clutch play, then why is Axile on there? Like, am I missing something? Does this guy just win a million clutches and I just never saw him? Like, he's not even that into the game to me. So if we're doing it that it's to do with winning clutches, I'll take Perfecto. If we're doing it that really like some sort of like lurk rifle role, then that probably itself could be like Blame F or fucking Rops or something. You know what I mean? So my problem was just the category for this one, mate. The category is what throws me off a bit. How did you think it should be defined?
Okay, so this is what they literally wrote to me when I voted for it. They said the requirement for this role is that they play extremity spots on at least 3 maps, whether that is a soft or a hard lurk.
The problem is when they put the word soft there, guys, they just essentially said, actually, just put it whoever you want there. If they do, you know what I mean? Like the first part of the category is brilliant there. This is how you see how HLTV.org is. That sounds great. You've defined it very well there. Play with extreme extremities positions, outskirts of the map, on at least 3 maps. Brilliant. If you stop there, by the way, we can have a great but they had to, because they want to finagle it, like I say, finagle it. So then they just go hard or soft. As soon as you say soft, what you essentially mean is, I don't really actually play on the outskirts on any map. But you know what? I'm sort of...
He's been there. It's like I've seen him there before.
Done everything.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Look, there are definitely maps where you're going to see Axile on the side of the map, but I still don't know that actually qualifies. So who did you pick for this one?
Well, I picked Axile in this one. I think even though he's actually opening up a lot of rounds, he is kind of on the extremity. Closer was a word to me that was like the least defined of these by far. Actually, I think it would have been better if they just put support player, and then make Axile and Niko battle it out for opener of the year or just rifler of the year if they really like star rifler. Like I didn't love this idea, but yeah, my 1, 2, and 3 went as follows. I put Axile number 1, Twist number 2, and kRYSTAL number 3 actually. So. I think also.
Wait a minute. We're also somehow getting this category to include Twists. He's not in the entry category.
That's why also
you know what I mean? Like, come on.
When I saw Twists,
if you even think to yourself, look, take aside stats. If you just for the year think of entries, all the entries are Twists fucking entries winning the game.
I know.
Like T-side entries winning every bloody tournament, isn't it?
Another way that I was thinking about it was like closer, like they close the game out because they get some key like I kind of thought this could also be like.
That's why the lurker one made more sense because you know what I mean. Like put it this way: if I think of players, Rops is the closer if he's closer rifler. Really. That's a perfect fit there. Great, brilliant. We've checked all the boxes, haven't we?
They actually gave us some stats for like clutches per 30 rounds, and of the people that they had listed, actually, I think kRYSTAL was the highest by far. He had the most clutches per 30 rounds, and second place was Blame F. Third was Spinks, and then Rops actually was right behind Spinks, so he was like 4th most in this category. So if you really just want to judge it on clutches alone, you would have just picked kRYSTAL based off of that stat. But again, like this category is very hard to understand what they were asking for. So I kind of went with a little bit of like players that I valued. It's kind of like players I just valued highly, actually.
Yes.
That's kind of...
Because here's the thing. The other problem with that category there is, notice of those names, that's why actually if you were doing it by like stats, Rops would win because he has similar stats to the others, but he's played way more finals and won them. Because I have to say, when I think of like roles, that is how I think of Rops literally in FaZe Clan. Like I actually think, by the way, as a quick aside, the level up no one even considers is, what if FaZe does nothing, but Rops actually just becomes an even more dominant individual player? Like that's the game over for this year if they just do that. Because he still has that gear in his game. Like actually in this FaZe Clan, because of how much work Twists and Brokey and fucking Rain were able to do, half the time you never needed Rops. It would always just be when he'd be in like those mad 1v3s and it was like, right, look, he's the only one who could win them, so let's let him have a go. And he would just win so many. So actually for pure closer, it feels like he should win.
There was actually a quote from Kerrigan pretty early on in the year where he said something along the lines like, we couldn't run certain strats with Olaf, but now with Rops we can, because if you put Rops in this 2v3, the strat is good, but if you put Olaf in the 2v3, it's not it's not a good strat, you know. It wouldn't you're not going to win based off of that. So yeah, I think if you actually...
genius part about that is, like, the way he's phrased it there sounds like he's bigging up Rops, but he's also low-key dissing Olaf.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, yeah. Just on his last legs there.
That's how you phrase it, though. Yeah, exactly. That's how you phrase it.
Yeah, but just to give Axile a little bit of like, specific praise, one thing that I loved about Axile in 2022, I said on Hot hot take point made that he was my rifler of the year. I've said multiple times actually now that Axile's been my rifler of the year, and he continued that. It's just that the series he's played against FaZe consistently, he's just been the reason that they've gotten over the line. I looked at all the series that Cloud9 or that roster, because they had different names, played against FaZe this year, and in like half of them, Axile is the top
he's had some
performer.
of the best series of the year.
Yeah.
If people don't know, put it this way, here's the best compliment you can give Axile. I think just him individually is the reason FaZe doesn't have an era. Otherwise, I think they would have had an era. If you look at the tournaments that he did in, like, it would have been easy. Imagine they just win the Dallas event after that. You know what I mean? Like, give me a pro league. No, who was going to stop him at pro league, mate? That was a really fucking dodgy tournament. You know what I mean? Like, they would have a couple more titles if it wasn't for this guy.
They would have a Grand Slam. They would have won a Grand Slam by now if it weren't for Axile.
Exactly.
Yeah, Axile robbed him of that. So that's, I mean, that needs to be workshopped. There needs to be a nickname for Axile. He needs to be the guy that robbed the Grand Slam, you know, jumping over the fence, whatever it is. Okay. Anchor of the year. This one was also weird because not all of these people played anchor roles on every single map. Like, they put Shush and Tessus actually in the nominations here. I don't know if either of them made it to top 3 actually on the listing, but for this role, I put Naf. I think I kind of wanted to immediately put Perfecto when I just kind of like thought of it off the top of my head, but then I saw Naf's available on the nominations, and so I went with Naf because I thought that he was just individually the best player of everybody that was on this list.
By the way, I realised now I got them confused. I confused closer and anchor, actually. I should have had Axel as my closer then, by the logic we were doing before.
Sure, yeah. If you want to change that.
I think I mixed up the Perfecto and anchor one. There they go, then keep going.
Okay, yeah, so I put Naf as my anchor. He was just considerably better as an individual than most of these people. He went from being, to me, this was like the most impressive thing for his anchor resume. He went from being literally the best B player in the world. Like, literally, if you just looked for the first 5 months, CT side, Inferno, like, he was the best rifler. Like, he was destroying on that position, and then he swapped to Pit once YEKINDAR came on the team, and they swapped roles around a little bit because they had to give YEKINDAR B, and he became one of the best Pit players in the world. That put Naf easily over the line for me. Number 2, I had Perfecto. 3, I actually had Shush.
I actually think, even though on this category, I do think number 1 and number 2 are hard. Like, I don't hate the Naf one. If people actually saw the last few months, he almost did always deliver in those sorts of positions. But the problem I have with this one is, I actually think, like, I can go Perfecto or Naf. And Perfecto one I'll probably just go with, because as I said, I did it for the other one anyway. But I actually think the top 3 for this one is excellent. I think these are the 3 best for this role, even though they're having a hard time defining the roles.
What did they put as the 3 for?
They actually put Perfecto, Naf, and Shush as the top 3.
Oh.
I think those are all 3 bangers.
Okay, well, that lines up exactly with what I put.
That's a slam dunk. Yeah.
I'll read what they had for the other nominations. They had Inters, they had JDC, they had Modern, they had Magisk, they had Tessus. That's it. I guess I actually think Magisk was pretty good as an anchor for Vitality. He was kind of sneakily good because he didn't do a lot overall in matches, but like you could usually depend on him to be pretty good, like back silo nuke or like pit on Inferno. I think actually when I actually looked for someone to be reliable on Vitality after Spinks started having his drop off, the second best guy on that team was Magisk, but didn't really result in anything, so I didn't consider him in my top 3. All right, then let's move on then to IGL. This one also very easy in my eyes. The only thing I would have changed is the order. HLTV or the panel put Kerrigan number 1, Cadian number 2, Jame number 3. I put Jame above Cadian. I think the major win is more impactful. It's more important. It's going to go down in the annals of history in a greater sense. And I think that also the adversity that Jame faced this year is why I would put him number 2. The fact that he made Norbert into a world champion is something that I don't think even Cadian wouldn't have done that. Like, they kicked Norbert pretty shortly after. So, but Kerrigan was by far the best IGL of the year, winning Kato, Cologne, the major, Pro League. Like, they did it. They basically did everything they came to do this year. They would have wanted to win more in the latter half of the year, but with that stellar of a resume for the first 6 months, I can't really blame them for getting a little bit, just taking their foot off the gas just a bit.
Normally, this actually should be the category where I could open it up as wide as possible, because at the end of the day, in-game leader, like, we are purely speculating anyway, even when you sometimes hear the comms. And then secondly, it's like quarterback in the NFL. It's like you don't really know by the record of the team how good the quarterback is. It depends who he's throwing to, but, you know, all the other factors in the team. So normally I would say this actually should be when you can mix up wide open. So actually, even though to a fan's Maui, it's a slam dunk just because of the titles, normally I would say that isn't how we judge IGL. The difference is, though, I think this is a very unique weak year because one, not only did Carrigan win like way more than everyone else, and the joke is even his flobs, like guys, he could have had at least one or two more titles, at least one more. The Blast 4 final, we know that one. He's like a round away. So, like, he's not only that close as well. Could have had like a few more. But then if you look at how they did it, mate, this has to be probably, like, I'm not exaggerating. I think this year actually might be a contender for like best IGL year ever. When you look at what you're working with and what you got out of it, like, didn't he get almost a max out of everyone? Didn't everyone come to like almost a career peak? Everyone noticing their role is getting nominated best player. And yet here's the key detail to point out. At the end of last year, so at the end of, not 2022, I mean 2021, obviously, we're all still cycling through. At the end of 2021, when he signed ROPS, right, I remember looking this up. Go and look at the 2021 top 20 players of the year. All three of his stars were like bottom of the list, Maui. It was for no real, like Brokey, ROPS and Twists were something like 18, 19 and 20 or 17, 19. They were like right at the bottom of the list. So that means what you gave Carrigan was you went, oh, I'm not giving you Simple or Niko or Shira, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you three of the worst players on the top 20 list. He took those players, and the joke like I just said is like he almost won everything. In fact, by taking those three players, they're also nearly all top 10 now, by the way. A couple of them were like brink of top 5. Like the top 5 to 10 just was his players pretty much. So like, again, if you want to ask questions like what were like before him, what were like afterwards, contrast, like what he was working with, what he got out, like you can't really do much more. Meanwhile, the downside as well is this. On other years, there would be someone, it was often Carrigan himself who was making miracles work with the team. There's no one else. Like that's the problem. The problem the other people have, and this is part of why no one won more than one trophy, is everyone else has like 3 months where their team's really good and then they drop off and they have the big spike. So if you look at everyone else, like I know a lot of fans are going to go, Cadian and Jim, because they're not traditional names. But it's like, guys, who the fuck else would be on there? Glaive definitely isn't on there. No. Keep going down the list. Like, Snappy was like the first half of the year. You keep going. G2's whole problem's the IGL. Liquid, no one ever mentions fucking Nitro. You go down, keep going. Art is probably actually one of the weaker elements of, you know what I mean? Like, when you go down, this is actually a very weak position, and this year was quite weak. So I think, actually, I find it hard to argue against Carrie. You got to be number one. Like you say, number 2 and number 3 is probably the more interesting one. I can go either way on that one, because the problem with it is, on the one hand, I actually do think that James does a really amazing job for like his specific group of players. But I also do think actually Cadian's IGL is one of the only areas I don't really have much of a knock on him. Like to me, a lot of the times they lose those close series. I think usually it's individual players. Like I'll say the same thing I've always said. I actually think Heroic's slightly underpowered still. That's why secretly I do want them to get a config or something, you know. I feel like then you'd really see like how good they are. So I think the IGL is actually one of the best things about their team. So to me, I think it's fairly consistently good actually. I don't know there's that many big flaws, you know. The only flaw I'd maybe say for Cadian, this is the one area I have a different take than other people, is I do think sometimes he sort of tries to set himself up a little too much. But then again, if I'm comparing it with James,
yeah.
Bloody hell, that's a Sophie's choice right there, isn't it? I know. It's okay, I'm going the same one. I'm going to go Carrigan, but I'll take Cadian second. There you go.
Right. Other nominations for this category.
It's a very solid top 3, though, that one, in my opinion. Very solid top 3.
It's really hard to break anybody in there.
I can't even get a 4th. Who's the 4th exactly?
Like, so
maybe Snappy from the first half of the year, just because he's working with fuck all. That's about it, you know. I can't think what else who else goes in.
So the nominations beyond those 3 were Apex, Dexter, Electronic, Nafany, Nitro, Snappy. Like, there's...
The problem with that one is the Apex one has aged so badly recency-wise that like no one in their right mind can put that one in. Who else was it? Dexter. I won't hate on Dexter because he did massively overperform what I would think, but like, I have a hard time putting it down to him doing that, mate. Like, a lot of that looked like the crosshairs of the players doing that.
I mean, they also told me straight up that after I think it was Dallas, the team had that big talk with Dexter and said, the way you're calling is not correct. So we need to come into this and we need to show you, like, let's update you on our meta too. And then we'll come together on like some sort of agreement.
So what we're saying is even Mouse doesn't think he was the fucking
Exactly. I actually think if I want to give Mouse credit in general, I think it's probably like the JDC Cyclone kind of guys that were like putting that Mouse NXT lineup together with Shuhei, and then they don't have Shuhei on anymore, so they're using Dexter, better individual player, but actually like in terms of calling style, Shuhei might have been the better caller. Like he made that Gamer Legion look very competitive at the last major. If I'm actually just taking like purely the style of a team, and I'm just like, if I said I could put any 5 player or any 4 players into this calling style, I actually think that I would really like to see most teams play like heroic. I think that there's overall style, like that's something I could give to Cadian. Like that's where like the theory crafting begins. Is that I think that the way he plays is fantastic. Like always being proactive, always wanting to find something else on the map, taking necessary risks to make sure that you're never on the back foot. Whereas James, I love actually watching him because it's such a like idiosyncratic style. Like it's so characteristically him. But I also don't think every team could play like him all the time, and
very few could.
Yeah, so I think it's just working for his group of players right now.
It's why I actually do think, by the way, whoever did scout those players did a fucking amazing job, because I don't think you can just drop any random Russian players and they're going to play like that. Like actually how those newer players like Fame played in that team was amazing to me. That was incredible. That was almost like some bit level shit. Like how's he integrated this fast? By the way, I'll tell you one that's been missed out here. This is why narratives ruin everything. Because why the fuck is Dexter, by the way, why is Dexter even on that list? Well, I'll tell you right now, if we're taking out where your team went, because remember, we're also talking about like the IGL. Dude, to me, Tabson should be over fucking Dexter. Look at what Tabson did this year with nothing. You are aware, guys, almost the entire year they were just using stand-ins. Like, they don't, how many, off the top of my head, Maui, for real, I think they might have played, like 2 or 3 lands with the real 5-man lineup. They were the ultimate team to have a visa problem. Guy can't play, guy's mysteriously ill. Like, and despite that, how many times did this fucking team overperform it? It was ridiculous. Like, I think the one thing you have to give Big Insane props for is the structure of the team. Like, it looks amazing, doesn't it? Like, I think Tabson probably is like a cheeky outsider to be fourth or something on this list.
I think actually, given the fact that he's using literally like Sin, and like the stand-in situation that they had was so terrible. Like, okay. Second half of this podcast actually has Krimbo, so people will hear what it came from his mouth. Like, so make sure people will watch the whole thing on that, because he has a lot to say about the stand-in situation.
That's the sleeper though. That's definitely the sleeper IGL. Tabson, there you go.
Tabson's, I would say Tabson's safely to me top 7 IGL. Safe, very safe. Okay. Last category. This is the one that's always kind of difficult in terms of how we judge it. It's Coach of the Year. Some people just want to go by win rate. Some people want to just go by narrative. I mean, it actually kind of is usually a combination of both. I'll give the nominations outright on this one. So the nominations that HLTV gave us were Zonic, Dastan, Blade, RobbaN, Saw, Exist, DJL, Gabi, and Groove.
Do you know what's sad about this? This is actually where this is one of the rare times I do feel sorry for someone who's a victim of my narratives. Because unfortunately, the one downside, if you're RobbaN, is it doesn't matter how many titles you win. Since I've built the narrative for about half a decade that Carrigan's like the ultra genius, does it all himself. By definition, you're not getting any of that credit. It's like whoever Blade's coach was when he was an IGL. You're not getting any credit either. Like, if you lose, we just assume you did nothing. If you win, you did nothing. So even though I do know that like RobbaN is like a good like sort of man management, blah, blah, blah. The problem is like, what was he supposed to do to win? But spoiler, he won't even be winning for me. And I'm like, you just can't win if you're RobbaN. That's just the way narratives work. Man.
Yeah. Another thing. Okay, so actually, I was thinking about this because I think Brokey or somebody on FaZe tweeted out like RobbaN was robbed or something. It's like, well, maybe in post game interviews, you guys
were joking about that. Like that apparently that was like a reference to some, I can't remember what it was, but some other meme where someone had done like, I think it was actually supposed to be. I'm not joking. I think they were referencing like Steph Curry's.
It was the Aisha Curry. There was the Aisha Curry tweet. Yeah, the one that was like. Was
that the tweet you were talking about?
Yeah. I think. Yeah, because
I think they were memeing then. They didn't really mean it right.
No, yeah. That's used. Okay, for context for that, because I think people didn't get, like, this was lost in translation a little bit.
Because it's an NBA meme, so a lot of European people don't know it, yeah.
The NBA meme here was Aisha Curry was watching the NBA Finals Game 7 when Cleveland was making that 3-1 comeback. And in that last game, there were moments where LeBron literally fell on Steph, and he did not get called for a foul. Calls. Yeah, there was some crazy calls. And as a Warriors diehard for life, since birth, I was fuming at that game. That was unbelievable, the amount of missed calls in that one. The one on LeBron falling on Curry when it was like going to be a fast break was like the worst one by far for me. But either way, yeah, kind of a lost in translation meme right there. I didn't put RobbaN in my top 3. But also, one thing I have to say about FaZe, if they want us to give RobbaN credit here, talk about him in a post-game interview for once. Like, I never, ever hear the FaZe players talk about RobbaN. And, I'm listening to like every single desk interview possible, and yet they're just saying Kerrigan's coming up with a strategy, or even they're saying more about Rops coming up with ideas here and there. So we're not going to give RobbaN any tactical credit to this team, even though he might be a great people manager.
Also, I'll just say it. It's not his fault, but he was actually not allowed by Valve to be with the team, and they did win the World Championship.
That's true.
So,
it was Eddie.
Again, that's like a mouse type scenario. It's like, look, I didn't say it, but the universe did sort of say they could win without me. I didn't do that, RobbaN. That wasn't me, man.
They actually did worse when he was with them at the Rio Major by far. Yeah, FaZe Eddie actually 100% win rate right now. That's just hilarious. Okay.
By the way, though, I did have, even though technically it's mildly controversial, and I saw he also won on it. I did also have Blade as mine. Because here's the thing, right?
I have as mine.
I actually think, if I explain it this way, I think people will actually get what I mean. I actually still think that the 2021 Na'Vi will actually age even better in history when people go back and they're like, so this Boomich guy must have been amazing. You're like, not at all. Like, he was just an okay guy. Like, the joke is the fact that we actually all, because like immediately they won that blast with some Die Young,
Spring final,
who none of us said is a really great player and amazing at this role and said has to stay. But everyone's reaction was, the Blade is so goated and Na'Vi is so good. If some Die Young just doesn't do bad things, he doesn't have to be good. Just don't do bad things and just get out the way. And actually, none of us are even asking, get another player in. Just keep the lineup like this. Like, that shows how goated they are. Because essentially what that made us all think is Blade can just make any combo work. And the fucked up thing is, I still sort of believe it. Like, he got me, mate. I'm a mark. I actually, for real, I actually do think Blade will fit. It's why, even though when I watched that guy play at Blast, the NPL guy, I thought that was just, like, as an outsider, I think that was terrible. I would never play him. That was like match fixing almost. You were almost throwing games there. Like, But the joke is, that's how goated Blade is. That I actually just assume he's right and I'm wrong, and eventually I'll see that like it was the right move, and eventually it'll flourish into some bit 2.0 or some shit, you know. So, like, low key, I do still think it's Blade. Like, I think if you actually look at what Na'Vi did, if you're simple, it's a terrible year, mate. If you're actually Blade and you consider you don't have a truly elite IGL and you have some scuffed conditions now where maybe you can't even recruit Russian people, I think you actually had a pretty good fucking year still, mate. Like, look what you... Remember, boom, it's after the major guys. That was ages ago. Like, Na'Vi was still a solid... Look, they weren't an elite team, but they were still pretty fucking good most of the time. Like, I think all in all, he had one of the hardest years to work with. As much as it looked like at the beginning he was going to have the easiest, you know?
Yeah, one of the things that can also go to Blade's credit... I mean, just the results this year for Na'Vi, even after the swap, like... To actually make it... Okay, the Rio Major was very weird. A lot of teams that were favorites got knocked out very early. And, like, this is something that ages better with time. But, like, when you look at that one, it's like, geez, like, Na'Vi didn't... Right now, our reaction is, like, Na'Vi didn't win, and that was a free bracket for them. But it's like, at least they actually made the playoffs.
They were the only one who did.
Yeah.
The joke is that the fact that they're the only one out, like, the top 5 or something, well, except, like, Cloud9, like, that was ridiculous. Yeah, I agree. You have to still give them something in light of what their peers did.
Yeah, exactly. So Blade was pretty much easily my number 1 for a lot of the things that you mentioned here. My number 2, actually, was Dastan. Because
I do like though that they made the list so long. This is another category where I think everyone could add a different top 3. Like I actually liked seeing the Saw guy in there. I thought he's also a mad underrated character. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he made it to the third. I think he
was third on HLTV.
Yeah, and it was like number 2 RobbaN, I think, by the.
The only thing is though, I have to ask you something.
Yeah.
Wasn't it implied that's why everyone loves Jim? That the Dastan guy, isn't it implied that he's just like the mate to the team or something? Is he actually coaching in the traditional sense?
So actually they said Dastan built this. So yeah, this is messed up because actually the way they used to describe this on like the old VP lineups is like, yeah, Dastan's just there for emotional support. They literally said this multiple times, and then now in the more recent interviews in the last 4 months, they said Dastan has like helped change everything about this team to make it fit with having fame and having Norbert.
Right, fair enough.
So then that's what, because I had the same opinion of him. I thought he was just doing nothing back there and just kind of chilling and, you know, giving shoulder rubs. But now actually he's a valuable asset, and I think that it's another reason you can kind of believe in this like Chiron change coming for outsiders, because Dastan apparently made Norbert work. He made Fame work, and I give now similar credit to Jaime and Dastan. I give it mostly to Jaime because he's the one doing it live, but I think that Dastan is also making sure that they're willing to try new things. Number 3 for me was actually DJL. This was actually kind of for what he did at the beginning of the year. I thought number 3 could have kind of gone in a bunch of different directions, and also the way the voting works, I think
he's also logically the main person you would give credit to for all that early NIP run. Because remember, that's before they have an IGL or a fucking AWPA.
Yep.
They don't have an AWPA or an IGL. Like, spoiler, you can't do anything in World Counter-Strike like that. That's why, to me, I really think the one result that would have changed everything for NIP is if they had have beaten fucking FaZe in that quarters at the fucking major. Because, mate, Like
Yeah.
the joke is they could have been in the final. That team was working miracles. I agree. And he seems to be the main difference. It was when he came in that they brought this style.
Yeah, they straight up changed their T side so drastically on multiple maps, Overpass being the main one, and they made that into like a home pick for much of the year because of how good he was calling on, or he was helping them call. Also, like again, it's so narrative driven for these kind of awards, because, or the way I would vote in them, because also the thing is that Hampus said that he would probably never IGL again if he didn't have DJL with him. Like, so that kind of stuff is like that sort of praise. You're actually not really hearing Kerrigan say the same thing about RobbaN, for example.
Oh no, of course
he's
not.
like
Yeah.
he could call with any coach, you know. It literally doesn't matter. And also I think just like I have had discussions one-on-one with DJL like significantly, and then I think that those sort of things factor in just the way that he's explained the game to me, and like I think it's kind of like I wanted to give him a shout because I think that like the way he sees the game is actually it's really fine-tuned. And also, like, looking at the results,
It's just another team. If you just look, the team over the year in general overperformed. They even made the last major. Like, what do you want? And the semis of the last tournament of the year. Like, all in all, yeah. But if you look at, like, remember, I always say with coach and IGL, you have to treat it like what are the expectations for what they were given to work with.
Yeah.
And this guy nailed it. Yeah, he killed it.
Yeah, they even won that like get Dubai event, and they beat Maus, and like at the time I don't think anybody really cared about that, but now seeing how much Maus has progressed over the last,
That wasn't that far before Maus went to like the Cologne and
Cologne
major,
semis,
right?
or Cologne quarters.
Was it just before? I'm guessing, right? Yeah,
I think it was in June, and I think Cologne was literally
July
the next
something.
month. It was the next month.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was right before Maus powered up, and they were kind of.
That was probably
showing...
a sleeper result then. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, those are my results. To recap, I had Op of the Year for Simple, Opener Niko, Closer Axile, Anchor Naf, IGL Kerrigan, Coach Blade. What would you have changed? I think you would have had like Perfecto as Anchor.
I had Perfecto as Anchor.
Yeah.
And then I think it's the same. Isn't it?
Let's get into the second half of what we're trying to cover here. We have both read Frank Herbert's masterpiece, Dune. We're only talking about the first book. We're going to explicate a couple of the quotes from it. Most of these come from those passages from fake texts that Herbert came up with to give context to the universe. These are ones...
Usually the beginning of a chapter, if people don't know. He likes to start a chapter with there's always like a quote from a historical book or scroll or some shit like that, you know, some polemic discourse.
Yeah. He's usually doing it to just like it's some of it's like the writings of Princess Arulin. And also for obvious reasons, there are going to be some spoilers in this. Like if you haven't read Dune yet, you should, first of all. The good thing about Dune is that actually they do reveal things to you very early in the book about what's going to happen, but it's kind of like Homer's Odyssey, Iliad. Like you know all the stories, you know where everything's going. It's about the journey, and it's kind of about like the workings that make this such a fantastic voyage, and that's why Herbert is such a that's why he's one of the best authors in sci-fi, if not history in general, because you don't actually really care about, like, if all you care about in writing or movies in general is like what's the twist, then that's pretty, honestly, it kind of shows that it's one note. Like if you never cared about the journey to begin with, then
it's kind of a pornography to that if you're rushing to just find out what happened, essentially. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I just read wiki articles for like bad horror films. Because,
I always think, put it this way, to me, this is what actually tells you if a book is good. Like, if you're actually someone who reads regularly, you know when a dumbass who doesn't read goes like, oh, that looks terrible, 1,000 pages. It's like, that's how you know if the book's good, mate. Because I agree, if it's a book I get into and it's one where I've sort of said, I should read this, yeah, that 1,000 pages is going to be a nightmare. If it's a really good book, you're going to be fucking, when you're like 200 pages in, you're going to be, I can't, there's 800 to go, this is the shit. You're going to be loving it. So, yeah, I agree. It's definitely that element to it.
Yeah, I reread Dune myself, like, probably 3-4 times. I didn't always finish it in these rereads, but like I would just read huge chunks of it, and then I would just kind of go back and get through it again, because it's just a great world, and it's also the writing quality itself is very good. Like one thing that Herbert does that couldn't really translate to any of the films ever is just that he does a lot of interior monologues with people, or like talks about or writes about their thoughts, and he actually does it in a way that's pretty tasteful, because bad writers, when they would do that, it's just like, ooh, is he scheming against me or something? But it's like, no, there's so many more layers to what's going on in a person's head, because so many of these people have prescience or oracular abilities, like, and so either way, let's get into this. This is the quote to basically kick off the entire book. It is, "A beginning is the time for taking the most delicate care that the balances are correct. This every sister of the Bene Gesserit knows." Also, I don't know if you pronounce these words the same as me. we're all just reading them in our head?
All good. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay. So how does that quote resonate to you?
I mean, basically, if again, I'll purposely make sure I don't give spoilers to the rest of the series. But as you said, if people know the sort of like epic journey it is, you can give hints because you can tell the trends of where it's going. Basically, this is like actually a central theme to all of Dune, essentially, which is so much of Dune. It's why I always tell people, if you love like Game of Thrones, not just for the tits and the swords and sorcery, if you like the element of like Littlefinger and what's going on with all the Dune just is that. It's like that, but better. So the premise is basically in Dune, almost everything that people are doing, yes, has simultaneous like every day, you know, like I'm going to do this to get X, but there's nearly always a plot within a plot within a plot, and then the idea is even your plot might be factored into like that. You might be the pawn in someone else's chessboard, and so essentially, people like the Bene Gesserit, who essentially people don't know, it's sort of like a female Jesuits. Essentially, that's why they're even called that. Like it's like a religious order around women who do things in a certain way, but because they also are plotting things out potentially over thousands of years and through breeding lines. Like this is why this quote's mega, because the point it's sort of making is like, it's not just about like what you want to accomplish or like, I want to do this. It's like, right, in that case, what would be the best approach to that? Like, what would be the best time to do it? What is there like a season to do something? Is there a certain way? Because a lot of the things that I've noticed, if people know things like novelty theory and stuff like that, there almost is an element within Dune, which is the idea of like, it's not just like knowing what to do. It's like the exact timing of when you have to do it is everything. It's almost as though, that's why I brought the idea of novelty theory. If people don't know, it's the idea that at like different points in history, like it's fluctuating in terms of like how much novelties are expressed or how much isn't. Like it's a different way of thinking of time, basically. So to me, I take that to mean sort of like the idea that like you don't just go out and do something in the world. You sort of think of all the finer elements of like what's the background ambience going to be, what the knock-on effects are going to be. And also sometimes when you do something, you don't just do it like that. You have to prepare, don't you? Sometimes, in fact, if you don't know, Dune is all about like long plots and like things that expand out gradually. And the idea is, except for the person who started the plot, no one quite knows until it's all teased apart, you know. So it's quite a good primer for the whole series, I'd say.
Yeah, but I would also say that if people are trying to take this and put it like into their own lives, I would say that one thing is that people, like the way I read this when I initially like first read Dune is kind of like, that sounds kind of like you're just going to be too diligent, you're going to be too deliberate, and sometimes for doing that means there's a lack of action. And I actually thought kind of on the negative respect in regards to taking so much delicate care that the balances are correct. Like a lot of people do that, I think, in their lives, and I actually think it kind of leads them to doing nothing, because this is what happens where people sometimes lead themselves to believing that I'm like, oh, I'm too much of a perfectionist, I'm not going to do anything. But it's like, no, but there's also like, you have to do it. You have to eventually act. And like, I think so many people live these lives that are of like just low self-fulfillment because they're just plotting. And I think that in a world like Dune, where you're trying to balance all these politics and like trying to put these schemes into schemes, it makes total sense to be this deliberate. But for the everyday layman, I would actually kind of advise against this. I would probably say just do stuff.
No.
Yeah, just go about your business.
The main problem I would say a normal person has in that regard, Maui, is like, they will do what you're talking about essentially is where they'll like overanalyze the situation before they start. And in doing so, they might actually choose not to start, for example.
Yeah.
That's an example there of where the mistake the person makes is they think, if I think through all the elements, right, that's not the right move. It's like, but you don't know all the elements. And also you might not be the best at what you're doing. So actually in that scenario, it's very easy, for example, to analyze and imagine a fear and think someone's going to go wrong. Like I'll give you a random aside. You know, in situations where someone might be like, right, you know, this sort of a person, like, you know, 78% of people fail in this regard. That's a great reason not to do it unless you think you can be an exceptional person. If you can, that actually tells you, by the way, if you can be exceptional, you'll make it. But if you're a normal person, they hear 79%, they go, probably I'll fail then, so I wouldn't do it. Whereas, like, actually in that scenario, you're probably better off just going for it and then figuring out halfway in. No, I agree. I took it more to mean, like, essentially, if you're in this super complicated world where there are so many delicate factors and alliances and plans, and essentially other people's plans are also going on at the same time, if you're going to do your own intricate plan, I would put a massive amount of effort in at the beginning, mate, because the more problems you get ahead of and the more things you settle out there and things you make sure are all attuned, the rest of it's going to unfold like clockwork. That's actually a piece of advice I would give in real life, by the way. I know it'll sound whack because it's not actually solving a problem, but if you notice a problem occurs regularly in your life, just get ahead of it and make there not be a problem. I'm not saying that as a stupid, inane thing to say. I mean, genuinely, like, for example, if you find you have an argument with your girlfriend every time you're late in a particular way, put in extra time to make sure you're not late that often, or put in a special thing where you call half an hour in advance. Like, this doesn't sound like much, but man, that effect can be enormous in your life. That's just some practical advice there, boys.
Okay. All right. Next one. We'll do to attempt an understanding of Muad'Dib without understanding his mortal enemies, the Harkonnens. It is to attempt seeing truth without knowing falsehood. It is the attempt to see the light without knowing darkness. It cannot be. I'll kick this one off. I think that contextualizing any subject, this case being Muad'Dib, with its anti, is necessary in order to know what is being played at. So it's like important in the context of Paul, because he's oftentimes enacting revenge. And so it's kind of like, if you saw his movements in isolation, you would actually probably think this guy's pretty despicable. He's probably not actually someone that you want to root for, but you have to kind of understand the whole time that he's playing back at kind of taking revenge or finding vengeance. And if I think that it's just kind of like, in a vacuum, everybody's actions don't really have meaning.
Yeah, to me, I would say the key thing, and this doesn't spoil the rest of the plot of Dune, but basically, you are right. Like, essentially, if people know what happens in future books of Dune, especially the second book, effectively, you could absolutely, if you didn't have the context, actually take the Muad'Dib character, who's sort of a messiah, to actually be like an evil figure. You could consider him like a Genghis Khan, basically, and you could look at all these negative aspects. But yeah, the key point there is, if you understand within that, in the Dune world, they specifically make the Harkonnen house, like, it's essentially like the Jedi and the Sith, if you don't know. Like, the idea is whereas the Atreides are more like duty and honor and, like, you know, in general, like helping people and stuff, but at the same time, like a martial code, etc. The key thing about the Harkonnen is they're like cruel and fucking take pleasure in like just sadism and stuff like that. And it's essentially like the most extreme, like dark version of the will to power. It's the idea that, like, because you have power and might, you are justified to do whatever you want. And if that means you want to be cruel to someone, in the same way as certain insects, like people might know, there's a type of wasp that like lays its fucking larvae inside like another like living caterpillar that just like gets eaten out. Like, yeah, that sounds horrific if you're looking in nature. But the point to make here is, if that's your main antagonist and that's the people you're doing everything in response to, in reaction to, battling directly against, essentially, you're not going to be the nicest guy ever. You're going to get completely wiped out by them. Like, if you're too trusting, they'll kill you. If you're too nice, they'll take advantage of that. Like, essentially, to me, what this quote tells you is, you essentially have to know how fucking bad the Harkonnens are to know, A, how justified actions against them are, and B, essentially, how important it might be, even if it fucks you up, to be a replacement for them, even if it makes you worse. Like, look, this is actually a hard one, because I have to say, Maui, an area in life that might be a blind spot of my own is because I don't, like most people in the modern day, have to actually interact directly with reality. I never have to kill someone with a sword to live or die or protect myself. I don't have to kill people for resources. This is a point I actually think is very valid about this quote here. Anyone sitting in a cushy house just reading a book, you can judge people all day long, mate. The question is, what if you lived in a harsh reality where there was an entire like cast of people who wanted to destroy you, enslave you? You'd at that point in time, you don't know who you would be, is the point of a quote like this, in my opinion. Like, if you were the nice guy, maybe we never hear of you. Maybe you're just gone in the story. Maybe there is no book. So I would say that's the key thing to understand, is like, when you consider what actually happens to this character, you have to know what the other essentially selective forces were, right?
Yeah. Okay. Let's go on. Yeah, I feel like this quote, actually, you kind of need to know what's coming later to like really, for us to go even deeper on it, but we're just keeping things to the first book. So let's go on to the next quote. This isn't necessarily because their law and religion were identical, making disobedience a sin. It's likely closer to the mark to say they cleanse themselves of guilt easily because their everyday existence required brutal judgments, often deadly, which in a softer land would burden men with unbearable guilt. Context of this is that this is about the Fremen. This is about their religion, and so what I want to hear your thoughts first, though, on this one.
I mean, this is actually probably one of the most interesting aspects about Dune. It kind of ties into what I was saying before. It's essentially the premise of like, how can you judge people when you have no idea what their life circumstances are and what their conditions of living are? Because basically what's great about the Fremen people in Dune is when you see them through the eyes of this character who's like a wealthy aristocrat coming from a different planet with which is way less harsh. It's like I said before about the Harkonnen. Initially, you're just going like, whoa, these people are way too harsh. Like, that seems a bit extreme. Like, well, it's a bit fucked up. Are they almost like sort of like essentially like merciless or something? But what you realize is, if you live in a literal desert that is starved of water, it's one of the best things about life is like your philosophy is very quickly going to become attuned to just what reality gives you. Because if you do it wrong, you die. If you do it wrong, your friend dies. If you do it wrong, your tribe dies out. Like in this scenario, it's actually one of the best things about life. If you notice, the areas in life where people aren't just tortured by philosophical conceits is ones where people are directly connected to the world.
Yeah.
Like those people have like a functional philosophy that they know works because they don't die out. Like it actually works for them. So essentially, I think that's a key aspect of this is like if you understood, essentially they're living in the harshest possible selective pressure environment. So actually at some point in time, it's not even just opinion. The things that they construct as their hierarchy of values are going to actually just be like reflecting reality because it allows them to sustain and continue in life. And so I would just say it's a bigger principle actually about like indigenous peoples in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the utility focus way that they frame their religion is something that I really keyed in on this one. It's just that it weighs easier on the morality of individuals, such as like they have to take water from their dead. You know, I think most people across even all civilizations on Earth, we are very used to seeing burials. And for them, they're just like, we need his water for the tribe. And that's probably something that feels incredibly inhumane as an instinctive reaction. And yet it's something that they just know they need to do because it's just like, it's just how they function. But I also thought that this had a really like kind of like a second thing that, or a second part to it, that it's just that also kind of in the way that the Fremen were such a, like, there's such a strong tribe of people, is that it not only was using, like, religion didn't just alleviate their conscience in terms of making some of these utility driven decisions, but it also, it ossified their actual, like, the structure and like how hard it was for like other tribe or like other races like the Harkonnens, for example, to break the Fremen until a figure like Muad'Dib came, and why there needed to be so much Bene Gesserit planning because they were so stuck in their ways that, and they like had a very hard time, for example, accepting Muad'Dib. They had a hard time accepting his mother. And this kind of reminds me actually of what Rousseau was writing against like Voltaire back in like the, you know, like the Romantic period, where basically like Voltaire was like very much like pushing for the Russian side, and Rousseau was on the side of the Polish. And he was saying, he had this like quote, I had to look it up because I remembered it. It was like that, it was something along the lines of like how Polish leaders needed to establish a republic so firmly that even if Russia or a foreign nation takes over Poland, they wouldn't be able, like his words were, they will not be able to digest it. And so like it's I kind of had a similar opinion of like the Fremen when I was reading Dune, is that it's very similar the way that the Fremen operated and how Rousseau wanted Polish people to actually just stay very closely knit together in their ways. Okay, next one is this is one we had to do. Like we literally, you can't go over Dune quotes and not talk about this one. It's the Bene Gesserit litany. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is a little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. So, yeah, what have you got?
The most famous Dune tattoo of all time / quote on the internet / motivational quote. Yeah, exactly. Everyone's heard that one.
DDK's got a T-shirt with this that he's worn at events.
That's entirely on brand as well. But this way, exactly. What I would say about this is, I actually think there's a deeper point to be made in that I think a lot of people haven't noticed, which is, to me, this is essentially just a way of verbally self-hypnotizing yourself to disassociate from a pain state, which, as far as I can tell, is the natural response to how every animal, including humans, overcomes extended pain states. Like if people don't know, famously, I'll even use an extreme example. Famously, a lot of people who are victims of sexual assault say a similar thing. You just kind of disassociate yourself, and you kind of just, and sometimes they'll even say, sometimes I even saw myself from like a third perspective, or I felt like I wasn't connected to my, because essentially what you do is you make the mind sort of go somewhere else, whatever this terminology I'm using means, so that you don't have to experience the visceral reality of what you're undergoing. So I would say it's a similar concept. Essentially, the point of this to me is, it's the idea that it's almost like, if people know in like Indian philosophy, with sometimes when you do meditations, you don't always sit in silence. Sometimes you will say, for example, certain like poetry over the time, or you'll sing a little song, etc. It's just different ways of tuning you into a certain thing. So to me, the whole point of this, it's why you can actually use it for real if you're ever having like a dental surgery or something. You don't really have to say all this stuff, but what I would say is just take your mind through a journey like this. Like, think to yourself, like, actual fear is my response to the situation. And the way I overcome that is I understand it's just my response. So I can sort of either change my response or I can disconnect from that response and I can feel something over here. I could imagine and visualize something and I could put my mind to that state and remember a different situation where I had different. So essentially, if you run through that, I think that is actually, to make a broader point, I think that is the ultimate way that humans psychologically overcome fear and trauma.
Yeah, I love that it's actually also verbose enough that if you were reciting this in the moment, like I think the first time that this happens in the book is when the Thopter or the Ornithopter is like falling through the dust storm. That if you're doing this in that moment, it's something that it's so you have to consciously recite this because it's long enough that it's not like, for example, some people say in like tough moments, take like a deep breath, long exhale type of thing, but like. You're not actually
breathing or whatever, yeah.
Like that type of stuff is great for just finding like a little bit of respite, but you're actually not completely, like you're saying, like dissociating from the moment, which this passage, if you were actually to recite it verbatim, it's tough enough that you have to concentrate. And I think that when Herbert came up with this quote, like he could have if he made this 2 sentences shorter, I think it would have lost so much value actually, because I honestly think that the first 3 sentences are powerful, but when he goes the extra distance on it, and it actually solidifies it, it makes it so much more iconic, and that because it's like something that it takes time to memorize this. Like I would probably, if I had to study this for maybe like 2 hours, then I would finally get it, you know. But if it were just something that I could just wing it, then I think that also I think that just kind of shows Herbert's brilliance, that it's length. It's like the perfect length for me.
I also think, dude, that there's actually like a literal reality to what he's saying as well. Like the latter sentences about the idea that like essentially, like once you identify the fear and then the feelings that come from the fear and that it comes from you do actually realize in the end, like the fear isn't me. And it doesn't have to actually be necessitated by this scenario. So I actually think that's actually quite a powerful point that people maybe don't understand, is like the premise at the end, because essentially I'll tie this into something that'll be a good example. This is what I've heard for real, Maui, is what people like Corby did when they would play through injury. It's not at all that the injury stops hurting. It's that they said what you do essentially, in Corby's case, for real, what he would think to himself was he would focus on what it is he's trying to accomplish. Like he wants to win an extra game or get the number 1 seed. He would just focus on that and he would just decide that that's more important than the feeling of pain. So the feeling of pain must be there the whole time. But in his case, what he's saying is every time my brain sort of acknowledges it, it then decides, no, there's something more important. So I can sort of make that. That's sort of, to me, what the latter part's about. It's the idea that, like, it's not that, like, you know, I think this way and then, oh, what do you know? All the fear's gone. Everything's cool. It's awesome. I'm having a great time. No, it's like the idea that, like, once you disassociate, it's still there, though, which is actually a powerful statement in itself. You're not going to avoid it. You just sort of don't let it take over, if you know what I mean. You don't let it overpower you.
I wanted your opinion, actually, on one of the sentences in it, which is, and when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Inner eyes, I'm kind of not exactly sure. Just because I didn't read all 6, or I didn't read all of them yet. So is there? I don't know if that's anything with the future of Dune, or is that actually the inner eye part, or is that just him using like kind of a spiritual metaphor there?
No. Here's the thing. I will say the whole Dune series is about prescience, and so technically the inner eye would be what people would say you're doing the psychic connection from. Where I don't think he means that. Like for me, the key thing there is what he says in the next sentence, where he says, "Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing." Basically, it's like a fucked up secular version of that famous thing where they go, and then I was walking with Jesus, and then when I looked back, there was only one set of footprints, and he'd been carrying me the whole time. You know that famous bit? You know the one I'm on about, Maui? Like, it's sort of like that. I think what they're implying is that when you look back, you realize, oh, the fear was what I was afraid of, but there actually wasn't anything beyond fear, was there? Mm-hmm. You know?
Okay, all right. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, next one. The Fremen were supreme in that quality that ancients called Spannungsborgen, which is the self-imposed delay between desire for a thing and the act of reaching out to grasp that thing. I think this one is more or less about delayed gratification, but I also thought in the context of Fremen life, we kind of talked about it earlier, the fact that they've developed things for their own religion to make it work in a desert environment, and I think that's really important with this, because when they use or exercise Spannungsbogen, they're obviously going to be able to like extend the shelf life of materials, of water, of things that are just surrounding them, despite the ecological hardships.
The problem with this is, if you're wondering why you would even put in like a fucking German, I'm assuming, term like Spannungsbogen, is because one, unfortunately, there's a lot of like philosophers that use terms like Weltanschauung and all that fuck shit, which is just within that vein of if you're in philosophy, people like to reference that anyway. But no, to me, the bigger thing on this one is like, first of all, the literal reality of what the Fremen's life is like. If you live in a desert, you also better be careful as fuck with everything you do. Like where you stand, that could be quicksand. In this case, a fucking sandworm could come and eat you. What you eat, like famously, like that's exactly the sort of place where the bog you think is one bog is like mimicking another one. That's, you know what I mean? Like it's all that shit's, the desert's all about that. So to me, it's another point about like the fact that in this particular case, that's one of the hardest things for most humans in the modern day to do. Most people have terrible impulse control. It's actually an area I think I'm quite weak in. Like one of my problems, for example, in the past was it was way too easy to like trigger me on Twitter or some format where it's like a very fast response thing. The difference is if I was doing that in like a written format, I could take all day and write whatever I wanted, couldn't I? But if you have bad impulse control, it actually, the problem with having poor impulse control, you can see this with people like Simple, is it actually means you don't really sit and think, what's my response? You just respond. And in doing so, you're actually a worse version of yourself. So I will just say in life in general, especially if you look at the Dune universe, the people interacting with the Fremen, remember, are coming from like aristocratic royal houses where on their home worlds, they have everything and every possible opulence. So in that world, essentially, it's just, can you have something? You can have it tomorrow if you want it. Whereas their whole world is about the idea of like living on the absolute edge and knowing that like sometimes you're going to have to actually choose the harder path to survive and all that shit, you know. So to me, there's a lot of that. Like essentially, this is like one of the background themes of the series.
Yeah, this one was also very similar to the earlier Bene Gesserit quote about taking balance before you begin on anything new. And I think that this is like, I mean, it's kind of like a different way of looking at it, whereas the Bene Gesserit have all this time to plot and scheme because they're always thinking about all the politics of what they're doing. The Fremen, it's like the Fremen version of that when you're actually in an environment that everything's trying to kill you all the time or take your water. Okay, last one we've got is, he tells us, the vision of time is broad, but when you pass through it, time becomes a narrow door. And always, he fought the temptation to choose a clear, safe course, warning that path leads ever down into stagnation. You want to take this?
The problem with this is I won't give away too many spoilers for the rest of the series, but a central theme of Dune philosophically as a series and a story is essentially, it's kind of like tying into what that Fremen quote was about. Essentially, one of the main things about Dune is the idea that, one, you would actually have to have like truly godlike prescience to really plan over like decades and human lifespans. Stuff. Like you couldn't do it as like a person trapped within your own lifespan, you know, sort of guessing what the rest of you'd actually have to really be able to see things. And also it's the notion that like, essentially, you know, that famous anecdote or I guess you'd say like analogy or whatever, like people often give. It's a famous story where it's about why, you've heard it before, you know, the one where like there's a farmer in China or something, you know, and then it's some scenario where like I think it was something like his horse runs away and then his neighbor says to him like, well, that's unlucky. And he goes, yeah, maybe. And then the horse comes back the next day. But when the horse comes back, his son goes to wrangle the horse. And so the neighbor goes like, great news, the horse came back. And he goes, yeah, maybe. But then when his son's wrangling the horse, his son breaks his leg.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, oh, bloody, now your son's done in. That's bad, isn't it? And the guy goes, yeah, maybe. And then the joke is like, the next thing in the story is like the military come and go, right, bring us your son. And he goes, I can't, my son just broke his leg. And they go, all right, we just have to go there. And the premise is that you can never really know from one action how, in totality, whether it was good or bad for you. You have to always sort of see how it all plays out. And crucially, and this is a really counterintuitive point to a human living one lifetime, what seems early on like the right choice, the right path to go down, might actually be totally the wrong one. Maybe it ends in a cul-de-sac. Maybe it doesn't go any further. And so without spoiling the series, one of the biggest plots and concepts in Dune is the idea that for the entire human race to survive, if that was your main goal, you might actually have to take what in isolation and individually would be considered very drastic or maybe even fucked up choices to ensure, because remember, you're choosing for the end goal here. You're choosing at the end, my only goal is humanity survives. Well, if that was really the choice, it's a bit like what we said about the Fremen living in the desert. You'd actually have to have at times some very harsh philosophy, and you'd have to do some really heinous shit potentially, because essentially you're just going for that. You're going for that Doctor Strange 1 in a million bajillion that you survive at the end. So to me, I think it's a primary theme of the whole series, and essentially, especially the idea that you can't yourself as just like a peon sort of know this. It's essentially for figures who are like above us to know these things and intuit them.
Yeah, this also gives. I think this actually sets up the universe pretty well for Dune because I think that actually the line about the temptation to choose a clear, safe course, warning that path leads ever down into stagnation, that kind of speaks a lot about modern day society and people that are just choosing kind of like you go to college, you get the 9 to 5 job, you get I don't know, you marry your high school sweetheart, whatever. You do all these things, and in actually in modern day society, you can kind of do that, and you live a somewhat satisfactory life. But for the Dune world, if you do that, you're gonna lose power so quickly. So it has greater implications if you just choose the safe path in this kind of world. You have to take a lot of risks. You got to make sure you're putting yourself out there because there's no really like there's no 9 to 5 job waiting for and retirement plan waiting for Paul Atreides.
I actually do think there's a broader point I would say from observation of my own life that I actually take from epic fantasy like this in fiction that I think I never understood myself. Because I used to think it was just essentially I disagreed with the stylistic approach, which is, I'll give you the best example ever. You know, in Lord of the Rings, the way there's that whole subplot about Gollum, where the whole premise of the plot, if people don't get it, is that in a fucked up way, they had to not be themselves dicks to the Gollum character, even though he obviously was going to in some way try and betray them at some point in time. Because essentially the premise was it was almost like a free will concept. It's like, who are they to sort of like go, well, I can decide already what you're going to do. And so I'll actually, since I know, even though you haven't yet betrayed me, you will betray me, I better just kill you now. Like, essentially, the premise, as far as I can tell, the theme that Tolkien was trying to implant in the book was the idea that each person, it's basically what these books are. Each person's like a walking vector for their philosophy in life and their principles. And their main job is just to be as true to that as possible. And somehow that means at the end it'll all figure itself out. And so the whole point, if you don't get it, is even though from our perspective, even as the observer, they're wrong on Gollum every step of the way, right until Gollum betrays them, but in doing so destroys the ring accidentally. That's sort of what a lot of these books seem to contain as a philosophy, because essentially they're just trying to, like I say, they're just ways of this philosophy interacting with this one and seeing what the outcome will be. So what I would say is this, is I do think like an example of this here is like there are times in life where, as fucked up as it sounds, this is why I gave the Gollum example. You can't, just because someone's evil and your enemy, you can't just make them the worst possible enemy and say, right, I have to kill them justifiably. Because for all you know, remember, they have free will. Maybe they turn the corner in the next chapter of the book of your life and become like, not maybe your friend, but like a momentary ally, or they do something positive, or maybe like an obvious example would be enemy of my enemy. Maybe they fuck up your enemy and that helps you in some way. So I would say that is a larger theme, I think, to all fiction like this, which is essentially like, aside from the fact they are literally books written by one person who did plan it all, life isn't like that, is it? Life is more of a sprawling thing where you can't really know, like no one person can ever sit down, which is what we all do as fans of games and fans of fiction, and think like, I'm like a godlike observer, this would be the wrong move, and that would be like, no one really knows that shit. Like, that's so ephemeral, isn't it? And like I said with the example of the Chinese, it's so fleeting. You might be right today and wrong tomorrow in both cases.
In the second half of the Mauisnake show, one of the most promising players from the German scene joins as a guest to talk about his rookie year playing under Big. Krimbo hopped on to tell us all about the Big clan philosophy and why they are such innovators in the space. The reason that Big has for always being on the cutting edge when it comes to nades was one of my favorite portions of this, and why it seems to be the counter to the #1 team of 2022, FaZe Clan. We're here for the Mauisnake show, and we've got a very special guest in Krimbo. You guys obviously know him from Big Clan, but yeah, welcome, Krimbo. How you doing for the holidays?
Hey man, I'm doing good, and you?
Yeah, I've having a great time, a lot of rest and relaxation after a very eventful calendar, a very eventful season. I know you were actually pretty busy at the end of the season in a way that I didn't really expect to see. Like you were playing with Big Academy again. You were playing in some other events. Do you want to maybe just shed a little bit of light on what was going on there? Why were you playing all these other events?
Yeah, definitely. Like I wasn't expecting it as well, and then just like one day they asked me to like, hey man, we've got some problems here. Do you be interested in just helping out your old boys again? I mean, because you don't have any other tournaments anymore. And I was like, yeah, why not? Like we traveled to Bali for the ISF World Championship, where we didn't get where we wanted. Like I think we got 4th place, and it wasn't like a real tournament, I would say. I think it was like also a bit holidays, because there were like over 700 or 800 athletes from all over the world
Oh yeah.
in like 8 different games, and you didn't have any practice rooms. I mean, it's literally impossible to have so many practice rooms for these athletes, and I kind of enjoyed it there and used it like as my player break, while the others were like here in Germany and enjoyed it here. So after that, we played the German championship, and it's we went successful. I would say it went our way. This was like the most important part of my help, and because like Sprout always won the last years versus the real main team as well. I mean, they won, but a big loss versus Sprout, and it was like a really important for Big to have this trophy in their hand again. So
right, you got to assert that domestic dominance. That's for sure. Okay, let's move back. Let's talk about kind of what went on to get you where you are today, because I think that you had this was essentially your rookie season in Tier 1. This was your first year. You were playing for a bunch of lineups prior to this, and I kind of want to actually go like all the way back to the beginning. So you played the first team that you have HLTV credit with was Big Academy, and this was some 3-ish years ago. I guess maybe even was it even 4 now that it's 2023, but either way, it was like 3 years ago or so.
I think 3, yeah. 3.
And like you were playing on them, and then you left Big Academy and you played for Alternate Attacks, you played for Kawana, and then you came back to Big Academy, and then now of course you've been promoted since to the main big squad. So I want to know, when you started with Big Academy there, like what was that process like? Like how did you kind of get in touch with Big then, and how did they know that you were a rising talent?
First of all, I think I know I knew now Tabsen for like 5 years or 4 years now, because I've been playing like in the German Pro League. This was like a FaZe division which is closed over a few years now. It's like the Go Big League hub or any other hub now, and then they wanted to like create their academy team, and he recommended me. And otherwise, I also my best friend is he's involved in Big as well. He is managing teams here as well, and he recommended me as well. His name is Denzel, and so this was like they had an eye on me already. I played with Tabs and FaZe. I know my friend who's working here as well, and so it kind of got rolling like this. The second thing was like everyone in their team, like we knew each other. We were good friends, I would say, and then it got rolling in 2020. I never had a real big place to show myself, and this was like the first step for me.
Okay, so when you played for the Big Academy team, you started getting to feel out, I guess, like I would call that like tier 2 CS, like you're playing against a lot of varied competition over there. You played for Alternate Attacks, but what I want to talk about in the time before Big Academy was when you played for kRYSTAL at Kawana, because that's a guy that I think a lot of people there's this mystique about him. Like people really kind of know of kRYSTAL. Obviously he did pretty well when he was playing with the Godsent people, like making it to I think roughly top 17 in the world, top 15 maybe in the world, and he helped bring up a lot of those guys that are still I guess they've kind of gone in some different directions, but more or less like people talk about him like he's this really great in-game leader, and people would kind of put him in a similar breath as like Hunden, where he wasn't always the most individually skilled, but he knew how to put a system together. So when you were playing under kRYSTAL, how did that feel? Like what made him stand out as an in-game leader?
Like one of the biggest things I would say is that he like was a team player. He didn't give can I say the F word?
You could say whatever you want as long as you're okay
like
with
he didn't give a fuck about statistics or I don't know, something else. He just wanted to win, and he gave everything for it. Even if he jumps out like he rushes out every time with a knife, but when we win, it doesn't. He literally doesn't care, and that's like one of the things I most like. That's the most recognizable thing about him. Then like he teach me from ground on the basics. I would say he's a guy who can tell him like, hey bro, I like this position or this. Maybe can we change some stuff here? I don't feel well at this. Yeah, okay, maybe we can switch parts, whatever. He was always open for that, and he kind of built me up to be a better player. I understood more the basics, and he also opened, because we had Skrunk and Crystal, he opened like a bit like the international side, how they play the Counter-Strike, yeah, like basically how they play Counter-Strike. And we had Skrunk, who had been playing like for nearly a decade, I would say, in the German scene, and he had his side, and from other players of the national scene as well. So it was like kind of interesting to see how they both think, and I think it also was a big part that Crystal taught me, but it was also really like amazing to see how Skrunk sees the game, and he's also like a really good in-game leader.
Okay, so when you talk about Crystal building you up from like the ground zero, where like what kind of information is he giving you in those kinds of moments? Is he telling you like macro picture stuff, or is he telling you more like here's a strategy and we're just gonna run it like this?
He didn't like how do you say it? He didn't really micromanage me or something else like that. I think he really trusted me in the things I was doing. He knew that one of my strengths is getting in the late rounds, playing that clutches
Yes.
and stuff like that. So he didn't really like, I wasn't the person he worked the most with, because I was like doing my thing. The early stages, he was like talking with the Oppa more, or with STFN, who was like our room taker in that 1 year. So yeah, it was just basically he trusted me. He let me do my thing, and he tried to play my strength and work with the others to get to the point where we have the most high percentage to win the round.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you as a player probably don't need the most hand holding, so he doesn't need to like teach you every single part of the game. Like you obviously showed that you were pretty serious business, especially at your first event this year, like the with Big, like the first big one with the RMR and beating FaZe. And
Yeah.
I want to talk about that because I think that's where a lot of people really began to pay attention to you, and people, especially myself, like were really hyped up for Big there because that was just such a sick result. You guys beat. I know you guys beat Outsiders early on in that, and then you guys beat FaZe to qualify for the Legend
Yeah.
stage. And I want to. So, what was that experience like for you? Because that one was, I think it was the first time you suited up at LAN with Big, and you had such a great performance there. Where I remember this very specifically because I was right there by the room after you guys won that. I was watching right outside. You came outside, and after you beat FaZe, I think you clutched against them at least twice. And you told me, you were like, I'm the clutch minister. You're like, I'm the clutch
Yeah, I
minister.
remember. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So what was that tournament like for you, and how did it feel?
So like the first event for me in Big was like the Pro League season 15, I think it was in Düsseldorf. And it was
Right.
like the
Actually, yes.
real
Yeah.
first LAN for me. So and there I didn't play really bad. I didn't play good. We as a team didn't really like sh showed up in this event. And it was like my first real LAN, and it like kind of got me like a little fire in me, because I loved it, because you can hear the others shouting, etc. I never had this feeling. So when we went into the RMR, we kind of went in without expectations, because we had like I was new in the team, and at this time we were struggling a bit. I would say we went in with no expectations. We grinded really really hard for it, but at the end we said, let's do the best. If we can qualify for the major, legends, challengers, contenders, whatever, And yeah, like we beat Saw in the first game, I think 16-10 or something like that. Then we beat Outsiders same day, I think, and then the FaZe game. I don't really know like how everything happened, especially versus FaZe. I mean, it was the first event where we had NK as our coach with us at the RMR, and we had Gob B the first time again, who had a break from Valorant right now. He didn't had any tournaments, and he wanted to come with us to the RMR, and they kind of worked together. Gob was working with Faven really a lot, like 101s, position training, etc. And then the three, like Tabson, NK, and Gob, did a sick game plan versus FaZe. And I think we just like I didn't really think about the like what I was doing really much, or like is this move now smart? Is this now perfect? Like I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, you're just in
And
the flow state. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And they just said, "Do it, bro. We trust you." And yeah, and it just like we as a team, we had like a really good team flow, chemistry. Everything was on point that day. Like I had some great clutches. Thompson had an insane Mirage game as well, and everyone was like feeling it, and like in the team speak, everyone loved like their teammate and stuff like that. I would like, oh, I think there's no better way to describe it. It was like a really good day, and yeah, like for me especially, it worked out really good. Like I kind of would say the luck was a bit on my side that day, because like I had these clutches was like you can't do it every day. The other team must play a bit like not have the perfect day, but yeah, I was feeling it that day definitely.
Yeah, I looked back and you played. I think you played it in total just 4 maps at that RMR, and you won 7 clutches. So like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
like and also a lot of the games that you played, I like the phase one of the phase ones went 30 rounds, but all of the other ones like were under 25 rounds. Like you were beating teams pretty clearly, and yet you
Yeah.
were still finding time and rounds to clutch in. So that was, I mean, that was super impressive. Why is it that you guys against FaZe have done so consistently well? Because obviously that's, I mean, they were the best team this year. It's safe to say, and yet, like you guys always like found a way in your structure, or what? Well, I just want to know from your words. What do you think makes you a good matchup for FaZe?
Like I would say their playstyle just fits us pretty good, and the Gob Kerrigan, like they played really long time together. I think he really knows also how he likes to call, because no one is an open book in the scene, and he just is in his mind when we are feeling it that day. He's taking timeouts and knows like, okay, watch out for this now, watch out for this. And I think they both really know each other. And I would also say if we like if everyone is wants really to win, and we have good game plan and etc. It's good versus them, but I don't think like I can't give you one point now where I would say this is the reason why FaZe is why we are their kryptonite, I would say now. But I think these few points would be my reason.
Yeah, how about this? I'll bounce off you a little bit. I'll give you reasons because I was covering a lot of these games, if not just watching them, obviously out of my own interest. I feel like with Big and your guys' style, you're very like I'd say you guys are one of the teams that's very thorough with map control. Like you guys are one that's like not gonna cut too many corners. Like I think you guys
Yeah.
maybe have a couple plays where someone might do something that's a little bit more individual focused, but for the most part, everything's pretty heavily supported with either teammates or utility. And that's something where if you're against FaZe, it's just going to be more consistent, even though it's a little, I guess, versus some teams, you guys might be more telegraphed, like people might kind of know what's happening. With FaZe, they rely a lot on individuals, especially on their defense. So you guys are going to have good T sides against them because when
Mm-hmm.
you work together, when you use your nades as well as you guys do, like sometimes they're gonna just bite because they think they can find an in on it. But like your guys utility is very good, so it's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult for them to try to get in on those kind of like little windows where they normally think they can maybe beat somebody, but against you guys it's just not the case.
I think our T sides are the key versus them, as you just said, because like I think a big part of their success is Robs, like who's doing these like as on CT side doing this random, like I would say random now, but of course it's kind of not random.
Sure,
Um,
yeah.
Pushing lower on Dust 2 or likes to play in Underground or on Mirage, stuff like this. And I think we are a team who can punish that. Like even if we are like 06, 07, or like 06, 07 behind, I think we like don't really lose our um focus and like still like okay now he's gonna be low. Okay, I'm taking this position a bit looser. Now he kills me. Like I was clearing it for the last 7 rounds, but now that like it's like 07, we are still pretty disciplined, I would say. And I think if we don't have a good T side versus them, it like then the match is gonna be really hard. But if we have a good T side, and I think I just said it, I think nearly all games had good T sides. I think, and the ones we lost, we didn't have a good T side. I think then we can get rolling and beat a team like this.
Putting together these T sides, obviously you're gonna have Gabi, Tabson at the helm, and I want to know. Let's go with Gabi first because he's a coach that so many people have a lot of respect for. He was obviously one of the pillars of German Counter Strike, and he probably still is actually to this day, given that he's still giving you guys input, still helping you guys. So let's start with Gabi. What is he doing? What is he bringing to practice? Because everybody talks about this guy like he's just always full of new ideas.
Mhm. Yeah, I think like I would say he and Tabson like they taught me everything of CS. When one person first asked me like, "What did they teach you?" and I was like, I couldn't even like I can't say like that he taught me this, Tabson taught me that. It's like they nearly taught me everything of CS. Like I had these basics, but to like open mind me more. Um, I mean, he's bringing a lot of like discipline. He's like especially for me, like when I have games, like I would say one of my weakness is if I think too much, and if I have a game where I think too much, he's like also he likes to like then he likes to shout at me, likes to get me out of like the tunnel.
Okay.
Was like a game, for example, at like Cloud9 Dallas on Overpass, I think.
Oh yeah,
Was
yeah.
like my first stage game. I played a really bad city side, and I was like doing things I never done. Like it was on stage, was on like there was crowd. Plus it was the first experience for me, and I was like a little bit like non-focused. And then he was standing behind me. He was like, "Come on, man, you know you can do it better. Like get your things together and stuff like that." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, definitely." Like I didn't realize myself. The rounds were just flying by. I was playing like an NPC would play. Like it was nothing special.
Yeah.
And then it just clicked, and it like I think it was also one of my best games I had.
You had that
And
clutch. You had that clutch against Cloud9 where
yeah,
you were in the pit and you 1v3'd them. Like was the bomb planted and they had to come at you and you killed like I think one guy CT or like I'm trying to remember exactly the kills you got, but you got one guy that was like that like flanked you monster. You killed one guy
yeah.
CT and I forgot how you killed the third guy. Maybe he was like approaching site or something like that. Yeah, I mean
I
you had a
think yeah,
really big
Shiver
one.
was CT. I
Yes.
think Exile was coming from short.
Uh-huh.
I think I killed Exile. I was like at the water pipe, like on the
I call
how
that
you
pit
say it?
usually. I usually call that pit.
Headshot pits, yeah,
Yeah.
like and in the water. I killed the shot player, Then I peeked the CT guy, but he wasn't showing himself.
Yeah.
Then I went up to the monster. I got the headshot
Yep.
fight versus Hobbit, I think.
Yes.
And then I had a reload. I tried to shoot with like 5 bullets. I tried to kill him, but it didn't happen. So I don't know. I took out my knife. I jumped to the pillar, I think.
Yeah.
And then I took out the Glock, switched it on burst, and then
The burst. The burst. Yes, I remember the burst. Yeah, that was the iconic moment in that play because like the first 2 kills were really clean, but no one uses the burst. Okay, actually, really quick side tangent. When is the burst ever good? Because I think people don't. No one uses the burst. So how do you decide then to close out a clutch with the burst? Because you actually double headshotted him with the burst. Like if you didn't burst, he wouldn't have died.
Yeah, I think I was on low HP, and I have to give credit to Tizian because he's like the Glock burst king or the Mech 10 jump king. Like he's he knows how to play every like these kind of situations. And I think I was low HP at like red HP, and then I knew I didn't I think I hit him once, but it wasn't enough to kill him like bam bam like fast. So I just said like fuck it, switched like right click mouse and let's go. Like I think it would have been like really hard to like double insta headshot him.
Yeah.
Like if you just normal click. So, but I didn't really think in that moment. I was just playing, you know, like I wasn't okay now. Okay, this. Then I have to do this. You know what I mean? I was just playing. I was like I was just feeling it, I would say, and that's also one of the things Gob told me. Like, of course, no one can outplay him, no one can outsmart him. I think he played it. He played CS:GO through, or how do you say it?
Well, I mean,
I think
he's
you know
played it
what
for
I
like
mean, right?
over 10 years. I mean, he's played so much CS that he knows every
such a legend,
situation.
definitely, man. Yeah, I think he no one can outsmart him, no one can outplay him, and one of the things I also learned playing with him, like of course, like he's really smart, but at the end, it's like how do I translate it? At the end, it's not always like I have to outplay him. Okay, oh my god, that's so smart. At the end, if you give him a headshot, give him a headshot. And everything that counts at the end is like to kill the enemy. And sometimes it's like more important to not think so much, focus more like on your crosshair, on to kill the enemy, then like, okay, how do I outplay him? Okay, he did this, maybe he's doing that now. Like that's like one of my weaknesses I had, that like, okay, maybe he's doing that now, so I can't do that. And like I was getting myself crazy in the game. And yeah, that's like also one of like you can just end it here, I think.
Yeah, no, I think with people like Gabi, I mean, it's never gonna be their brain that holds them back. It's just kind of like mechanics. I mean, that's what makes CS such an interesting game and such a complete game, is that you can either outsmart someone or you can just be better than them mechanically. And so, not that I mean, I don't think Gabi is a slouch in that regard, but against tier 1 pros today, there's so many people that are just so high skilled. And yeah, that moment we were talking about with the clutch and everything, it isn't always about finding the perfect way to get the advantage. Sometimes you just have to, because I'm pretty sure you were swinging around the pillar with the Glock and just bursted Shiro in the face. And moments like that, you just got to be confident. You just got to take the fight. You got to win the fight. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's why you're ushering in the new era. You're one of the new guys on the block. I mean, you say everything that Tabson showed you, Gabi showed you. How about like the big system as a whole? Because I know people just watching it, it feels like you guys always have some new grenades. You guys always have some way you want to play with utility that can sometimes even change the meta a little bit here and there, because once teams start copying you, now everybody's doing this play. How does it feel to be on a team that tries to be a trailblazer? You guys try to put those nades forward. You guys like is that something where you're always trying to get an edge? Like where does that come from? And how does it feel to like be the ones that are basically saying we're gonna try this first?
Yeah, first of all, we have I have to give a shout out to Zhao. He's like our assistant coach, or how I would say, like he's
Analyst or
doing the analyst, the assistant coach. He's like
Yeah.
doing everything tactical. He's also like 24/7, like on the server searching nades, and many of the nades we throw in game are mostly of him. But like you rarely see him at an event, so many people don't know that. And secondly, like one thing I understood when I think when we won Rubat, I think it's the first time when I like understood, okay, like we won the event, we was like happy and etc. And then we were like, okay, nice, are we in the top 10? But we want to get to that number 1. And I think that's like, it's not enough if you copy some other teams, other nades, that you can be there and can stay consistent there. You have to find your own way. Like you have to find your own system to get to that level and stay there. For example, I really like Heroic's playstyle. They're like kind of unreadable, and they can push you in that round with 3 players, but they can also play defensive and play really good. Like they can do, they have a style where everyone can do anything. But if you copy one of their systems, like can't be, and even if you master it, like you can't. I wouldn't say that's the way we want to go, and where you can stay like consistently on the top. We want to find our own way. Like we have our own way, I would say.
Yeah.
And we just have to master our own system more and more to get to that level.
So the way I would frame what you're saying is it's like you can, a lot of teams can copy other teams and then they can maybe make it to top 15, top 10, maybe even top 10 or whatever, maybe even top 5, but actually achieving greatness and becoming a champion and staying on top involves you having to start things yourself, or you have to be a pioneer, because if you're if you're just copying, you're not, if you actually somehow hit top 2, top 3, you're not going to stay there, because if you're relying on everybody else to do your homework, like then they're just gonna gonna pass you up again. Like you can't just keep copying them. Okay, all right, that totally makes sense. So that it basically, the way I would frame it is almost like also like you're future proofing yourself. Like you're making sure that if this is working, it's gonna keep working, because we're gonna keep working in this way, so that it's a system that can be replicated, and that's very important. And actually, that's really cool that actually everybody in the big system is like on board with that idea, because it is easier to just copy. It is easier to just look at what Heroic is doing and just say we're just gonna steal that, but then you're always gonna be a step behind them, because they know what you're doing, and then other people are going to know what you're doing. Do you think where the rankings sort of are right now, do you think that's really appropriate? Or like, do you think a team like FaZe is going to bump up to the top again? Or do you think a team like G2 has a chance to be the best team, not including your own, like where you think Big is going to be in this picture, but like who do you think's really the best right now?
I think the ranking is fair. Like I think Heroic is right now the best team in the world. I think they have like a good mix, like of like everyone in their team can do anything, I would say. Like for like I think one of the most the important part of Heroic is Cadian. Like he is sacrificing really much for the team. He is like on T side. If you've watched the demo from him, he's like only supporting, only praying for the team, only throwing nades, and then he plays the off at like 40 seconds.
Yeah,
definitely. And he's sacrificing a lot of his role, but I mean it's working. And he's also, when you see him playing, he's always like this, and he's always looking at the radar and doing like he's not like he's like the captain of his ship, and I think
he's
they are.
focusing on the big picture all the time for the team.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think like he's the key factor in heroic with like with everyone. I could say Stav now as well, but I think Tezos, Shush, and Yavi are great players as well. So Navi will grow again. I think they have a hard time right now. I think no one expected much more of them. Of course, their self expected more of themselves probably, but I think it's fair to say that they have had a rough year, and I hope they will be back again. For FaZe, I think they were kind of exhausted after the first half year because like they're playing. They had like nearly in like 6 months. They had a few weeks off, and they were like tournament boot camp, because they really want to smash the year, and I think it really worked. But when the year came to an end, like I think there was just little bit not much left in the tank to give it all. But like what surprised me is that Liquid didn't play so bad. I would expect them like to not be a consistent top 5 or top 3 contender this year. I would like, of course, they are in the top 10 definitely, but they kind of played better than I expected. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think Liquid for me when I watch them, it's a team that you see we've seen them now make it to 2 grand finals for ESL Pro League and for the World Finals, and if you made let's say you made a bracket of just like the top 30 teams in the world, you wouldn't always pick Liquid to make it to like top 4 or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely.
But they kind of keep finding a way, and I think it's because they have actually really oddly good matchups for certain teams. Like for example, they're better than they keep beating Cloud9, for example, like, which is a team that I think most people, if you kind of just look at everything like not matchup dependent, Cloud9 seems like they should be better than Liquid. Like they have a better AWPer. Axile's probably the best rifler overall of those 10 people. But then certain things about how Liquid call just seems to work very well against certain teams. Liquid has beaten Navi now. They've beaten Cloud9. But then they'll play a team like, I wouldn't pick them ever to beat like FaZe or G2 or even Vitality. So it's just kind of strange
Yeah, definitely.
how and matchups are just so important, it seems like, in Tier 1 CS. Which is kind of why I was interested in yours versus FaZe, because it feels like you just have the upper hand there, and something's good about that. Okay, so I want to talk about this year with Big, because you played in total 18 events with Big, and yet you played with 6 different lineups with Big. You were there in the beginning when Tizian was around and FaZe was getting integrated. You were there when FaZe got sick, and then kEdo came in. Tizian was still on the team at this time. You played with a lineup that, like, once Tizian was benched, and then you had FaZe and kEdo beside you, and then at the end of the year, you started playing with Sin for FaZe, and then there was even a time when FaZe came back and kEdo sat, and Sin was... Either way, everything with Big and your guys' rosters this year made it really hard to expect consistency, but you guys still had a couple nice peaks. You obviously won the Rubet Cup. You actually hit top 7 in the world on HLTV rankings, and for the most part, you guys made it like every series you guys were in was pretty competitive. Like, it never felt like people could count out Big, because everybody knew that Big could take down teams like FaZe, and those kind of wins made it so that, I mean, it was just awkward. You guys were an awkward team to play against, because I think it was probably hard to scout too. But I just want to know, from your perspective, what was it like playing in a team that's basically changing your 5th player every single week?
So like I think I was missing 2 times as well.
Yeah, you missed
This
2, and then
year,
Gabi came in at one point. Yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the year, like when I played the German Championship, I wasn't there, and then when I had COVID, like in the middle of the year, he played Pinnacle Cup. Yeah, so it was like, I think it was a bit strange, and I think we were a little bit harsh on us, like at the end of the year when we like try to resume this year. We're talking about, okay, this event, and I mean, like when a new player on like a stand-in, when Sin came in because Faven was sick, it's like you have a little bit more motivation, I would say, because like okay, you have to now even work harder. You have to do all the like not all the things, of course, but you have to repeat again. So he is not like just a robot. Like you do this, do this, do this. So he also understands the system. He's like can do his own like how do you say it? His own choices and like get really rolling into the team. So I think when he came in a few months ago, everyone was like a bit more hungry to get now what we wanted to achieve. But as you said, it was really hard to get consistency because like I had been at the beginning of the year, I was playing like mostly the anchor positions and kinda lurk roles. But when Tizian got benched, I kind of played his roles
Yeah.
till now. So and then Keto came in, he played his old roles, but then Faven had to play new positions as well, so everything was like a bit switched up. But
Yeah, I
I
remember like Dust 2, I think you were playing with B with Favin at B with Favin at one point, and then you
yeah,
switched
true.
to long A because you had to take up Tizian spots. Like, I just want to also make sure like the audience knows this that you had to switch a lot this year. Like when I was going through the games, when I was watching you play, like sometimes you were the one, and a lot of teams when you look at them integrating a new young player, they want to make sure that everything's as comfortable as possible. Even Navi when they were trying to use NPL, were like we're gonna give NPL his spots, even if it's for bit spots or whatever it was, and that's because they want them to gain confidence right away. But Big was just like you're gonna play every spot we need you to play.
I think in the beginning it was like this for me as well. When I played the RMR qualifier like in February, it was like the same. But then like when I grew more as a person, as a player, definitely when Sin came in, like because he came into the team like I came in like a bit like in the like cold water, I would say. Like okay, now you're playing tier 1, bro. Now you have to like learn more. Now you have to work even harder. So
It's like
it's
we'll say like jumping in the deep end. Like
yeah,
that's the
okay.
phrase we use sometimes. Or yeah,
Okay,
I get what you
because
mean with the
like
cold water though. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just a German phrase, and I tried to do it in English, but
Yeah, yeah.
so when he came in, like we wanted to make him like play as comfortable as he could, because like I think it's really hard. I think it was hard for me as well, and I think it's hard for every young player. If you come into the team and your first event is I am Rio Major, or I mean RMR, but it's the major, it's like of course like if you play other roles, like you have been a like star player before in the team, and now you're playing anchor and you play the support role, but you have never like really done this. It's really hard like for the whole system. So we try to find solutions for everyone, and I think it was good as well for me in the end, because I learned pretty much as well. I played anchor roles, I played like supportive roles, but I also played kinda like switched up roles where I like I'm floating on the map. I will be can do there my move, I can do there. So I had like kind of a bit of everything, and I think it was a good experience. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next year then.
Yeah, let's talk about the next season because I hope that Big can work with the roster that you guys put together. But let's like objective wise, what is Big hoping to achieve in the upcoming year, and then we'll talk about your personal goals after the team goals.
I think what first thing we want is like getting consistency, like playing with the same roster
Yeah.
every event. Like of course if you get COVID, like there's nothing really you can do about it. Um like playing with the same roster, like keep evolving as a team together, like not making like any big how do you say it, like big like failures. But of course sometimes there are gonna be these games where I mean every team has it. Navi loses was I think it was endpoint, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think these
Right.
things also build you up more as a team. So first thing is consistency, like getting back into the top 10, staying there, keep evolving in these tournaments, also being a playoff contender in the tournaments. We are playing the play-ins now in Katowice, but also step by step. Want to qualify for the main tournament first, but we also want to be at least at the mid of the year, or like at the second half of the year, we want to be a active playoff contender, like really fight for
yeah.
that playoffs and not be like play-ins. Okay, we're probably gonna do that, but playoffs getting going into playoffs now, it's gonna be really hard. So this and I think these are like the most goals of every player.
Yeah, so what about your individual goals? Because your rookie season, it didn't blow. Let's just say this: it didn't blow anybody away. Like it was very
Yeah.
good in the beginning. What do you want to see in terms of your own individual growth?
Yeah, like as I said, like in the team perspective, I want to be consistent as well. Like hopefully we can be like that this year. Like I wanna play my positions. I wanna grow into these grow like more in my like play style positions in my like in the whole system. Um and like I kinda would say I had this year with a few events where it was like fully off, but we also were as a team pretty off. So like these things, I want to be a player who you can rely, who's really reliable, as you said, because like I wasn't. There were events last year where I couldn't identify myself with that was I was playing with, and I don't want these things to happen again. So I was talking with Gob about it already and stuff like that to build a really consistent base for myself and grow more as a player, but also like as a person, want to be like I think I'm more confident than ever right now. Like you always have to think you are the best player on the server, otherwise like if you only say okay, but this player like then you can never get to the top. It's like copying like other teams and trying to be the best team in the world, consistency. And these are my biggest goals. Like I mean, what like not many goals, but one big thing. I think it's consistency and growing as a player.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to find consistency, I'm sure, when you swap those roles. But now that you have the experience in all these new positions, I mean, that's just wisdom. Now you're gonna be able to take
Yeah.
that and move forward. Looking at 2023, it feels like players have a really good their fingers are on the pulse of what's coming up before analysts, before the fans are watching. So who would you look at in 2023 as a team that maybe people aren't talking about right now, or even a player that people aren't talking about right now, and you think that this team or player is going to do damage in the upcoming year?
Like when if you would have asked me like a few months ago, I would definitely have said Heroic
Okay.
because they were like in the top 10 or also at one point in top 15. But they are a really good team, but they were a little bit inconsistent.
How about this with heroic? Do you think right now that if the it's going to be in like 5 months, but the next major, do you think heroic, like who do you think can contend with heroic? Because I know you like how they're playing a lot right now, and I would say that they're the major favorites going into that, unless things change between now and then. But who do you think is
Yeah,
even
definitely.
like second? Who's second best to them?
Like probably second best. Hard to say, but FaZe or Navi.
Mm.
It's like like the team who will take it away from them. But of course, as you said, like it's in 5 months. Maybe in that time it will be like Heroic taking the trophy from FaZe or Navi again. Like
Yeah.
it's not that Heroic are the favorites in a few months. So let's see. But Dark Horse, I think Fnatic wasn't bad.
Oh, Fnatic.
We
Okay.
kinda underestimated them, I would say. They're not so bad. But like I don't think they can do big damage like in these tier 1 teams, but I think they could surprise many people. Otherwise, I would say Furia or ourselves.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Like the self-confidence. Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah,
appreciated.
because like when we looked at the major, I think it was like barely in the top 20 when we played I Am Rio major. I got the question as well, and I was like thinking, okay, there is Furia, okay, but they're not the underdogs. They're playing home crowd. They had some good last events. There is Nip, Ends, Cloud9, Fnatic, like okay, like no one's. And I thought like, okay, what about us? We nearly didn't qualify for the major. The event before that, we were at Blast. I think we flew out at the last spot. And I was thinking, I was just naming ourselves because like no one was having us on the radar. We nearly went 3-0 in the challengers, went on to legends, and then barely missed the champion stage.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. 2-3. Yeah.
I think yeah, definitely ourselves Furia is a good contender because I mean they've been playing insane on the I Am Rio major, but there have been like also lacking of some consistency in the other events, right? Like in the Katowice or in the Cologne, they've never been on the radar really there. So looking really forward to see what they can do there.
Okay, cool. I think that's actually gonna wrap this up. Thanks a lot,
All
Krimbo.
right.
I'd love to.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'd love to touch base again in maybe a handful of months, maybe after you lift a trophy or whatever happens. The progress with Big, we'll see. We'll see as it comes. But
Of course,
yeah,
man, of course.
thanks for hopping on.
Thanks for inviting me.